Hello and welcome, everybody. My name's Frank Vespi. I am the owner and publisher of The Racing Biz, theracingbiz.com. Thank you for joining us here. This is our third Truth to Power in the series of Truth to Power virtual panel discussions addressing issues of diversity and inclusion in the thoroughbred industry. Thanks so much for joining us, whether you're watching on theracingbiz.com or on our Facebook or YouTube feeds. Also, you can find those at The Racing Biz at those respective sites. But thank you so much for joining us. We encourage you, if you have questions, please ask them either in those locations or you can ask them on theracingbiz.com. There is a form there under the live stream post where you can ask questions. So please feel free to leave us questions as we have this panel. Today's panel going to focus on horse players and the experience of horse players in markets itself, who it's marketing to, and what that says to everybody else, is how welcoming the industry is and what can be done to make it more welcoming. I first, as we kick this off, want to say Heidi ho to our co-organizers here. Alicia Hughes of TVG has, as always, done yeoman's work. You'll be hearing from her momentarily. And also Teresa Gennaro, who is a educator and freelance journalist, is welcome to both of them. And thanks, as always, to them for all the work they do to make these things happen. And then our two guests today, Barry Spears is a handicapper, and he's co-host of the Going in Circles podcast. What team is on your hat there, Barry? It's we just got the MLB logo.
It's actually a Pittsburgh Pirates hat.
Pittsburgh Pirates hat. All right. And Dave Good. and really never have you?
No, Boston is as close as I got.
And Dave Goodfriend is also a handicapper, and he won the 2018 NHC Tour and is not wearing a Pittsburgh Pirates hat. Dave, welcome.
Thanks for having me, and look forward to a meaningful discussion.
It should be, we're all looking forward to that. So when we did this panel, this is, as I said, the third in our series. Last one happened just about a month ago, and it was in the immediate aftermath of the Atlanta shooting that left 8 people dead, 6 of them, I believe, Asian American women. Today, we're also following on the heels of another noteworthy event relating to the diversity of the United States. That is the conviction yesterday of Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin in the killing of George Floyd, a killing that kicked off months of nationwide protests. And this is obviously a moment to extend our thoughts to the family of George Floyd and the friends of George Floyd and the people of Minneapolis, and perhaps to look somewhat, hopefully, to the future. And I know a couple of our guests here want to talk about this a little bit before we get into the meat of this panel. So, Alicia, why don't you share your thoughts with us?
Thank you. Yesterday was a day where I didn't really know how to feel. And I had a couple of dear friends text me just to see how I was feeling. And I said, I honestly don't know, because while there was definitely obviously a sense of relief when the verdict came down, there was no joy in it, though, because this wasn't, George Floyd's life is still taken. He's not coming back, and it did not need to be. And I didn't look at this so much as justice, as just a step towards accountability. And the fact that so many of us were so relieved and so happy just to get that accountability, it was almost sad, because it should have been a no-brainer. There was mountains and mountains and mountains of overwhelming evidence, from video to witnesses to, other members of the police, saying, this was wrong. This is not how we are trained. And the fact that even in spite of all that mountains of evidence, so many of us watched that verdict being read and we're sick to our stomachs, bracing ourselves to hear not guilty, because that is what we are accustomed to. That is what we are used to. And so to finally get that accountability, it was a relief. But like I said, I can't say I felt any any real joy in it. I felt sad that we were so grateful to get what should have been expected. But again, we are so accustomed to it because there has not been justice for so many. There's not been justice for Breonna Taylor. There's not been justice for Philando Castile. There's not been justice for, we don't have enough time this panel to run through all of the names. We can go, going back to Emmett Till and everyone. So I'm so glad that the Floyd family has some accountability to point to, but it was a hard day. It was a hard day. It was relief, but not joy.
Barry, you and I texted about this a little bit earlier today. What was your response?
I just want to reiterate the points that Alicia made. That it is disheartening to understand and be in a situation or a space where those kind of rights, civil rights, just human being rights, or just being a human being itself, could lead us to a path where only certain people are afforded certain kind of accountability in certain situations. It should never actually have ever been in the realm of possibility that Derek Chauvin could have, in effect, gotten off. And like Alicia said, it's just a strange space to be in. It's not very comfortable. Yes, you're a little bit relieved, but at the same time, you want to feel like this is the beginning of some change. And, as Black people are, as a people, very hopeful. We're not about revenge. We want things to progress moving forward. And hopefully this can kick something like that off. It remains to be seen. I mean, we've had shootings within the past day in a similar fashion, police involved with Black people. So it's tough. I mean, where does it end? I don't think anybody could predict that at this point, but it is a step in the right direction as far as accountability, and hopefully we can turn things around and move it better into a better place, not just for me. I'm not really ever thinking about myself. I'm thinking about my children and what they'll need to face down the road when they're my age or even younger.
Dave, did you want to jump in on this from your perspective?
Well, I'm going to chime in on a couple different perspectives. Silence is both an action and a choice. Inaction is both a choice and an action. And a lot of people choose to be silent. They choose to be inactive when it comes to real life important issues. And yesterday, history was made in the United States. There's just no denying it. It's sad that it took until yesterday for that history to be made. But history was made yesterday in the United States. And hopefully this can bring people more together than apart. And this can be maybe something that can bring some healing to some folks. As Alicia correctly said, this is not justice. This is finally a bit of accountability. And since we're talking here today about horse racing, and I'll just address the elephant in the room, the horse racing industry was deathly silent yesterday when it came to the verdict. There was nothing from the NTRA, nothing from any of the racetracks, Canterbury Park, no statements like you saw from Major League Baseball, nothing like you saw from the WNBA, the NBA, the NFL. Even the NHL has a 3-4 sentence paragraph statement on NHL.com. Racing industry, completely silent and just tone deaf when it comes to these issues over and over again.
Teresa, do you want to jump in with anything?
Just a couple things. One, I was really struck by your opening, Frank, when you were talking about how the last time you were together was after the shooting in Atlanta. And, the sad part is, as several of you have mentioned as well, pretty much any day we get together and talk, there is probably a very recent event along these lines of some kind of police brutality or injustice. And I think it's a sad example of how prevalent these things are in our society. Yesterday afternoon, when I heard the verdict and I was thinking about it and thinking about talking about it with my students in class today, I felt such profound sadness for Darnella Frazier, the teenage girl who took the video that we have all seen, who had the presence of mind to realize that something was going wrong and to subject herself to watching that for the duration until George Floyd died. And she has made a profound change on her own, but at what a cost to her. And having had to witness that, I'm sure will have just a tremendous effect on her for the rest of our lives. And I think it's important to remember that, George Floyd is a victim, Breonna Taylor is a victim, and so are so many other people of color who are forced to witness these events over and over and over, if not in person, then on their TVs. And, a year ago is when the Stronach Group became the first, I believe, to speak out about the racial unrest in the country. And they talked about having made a donation to an organization called Color of Change. And that was great. It was a pretty low bar. And in the almost year since, we've really seen nothing else come forth from any racing entities around this. And the frustration level, you've heard it from all of us here. And doing one thing, sending out one press release a year ago, doesn't mean that you checked off the list and are doing any real work. At this point, particularly in retrospect, it just feels performative.
I want to jump on something that Dave said a minute ago, and Dave, you said that when the racing industry is silent on this, that's a choice and that's an action of its own. And Barry, I want to ask you. I feel like there may have been two things going through people's minds here. One being never occurred to me as industry executive X to issue a statement on behalf of our company on this, or two, as a racing industry executive X. Well, a lot of my constituents are pretty conservative and think that think this guy's getting railroaded or whatever, and so maybe I don't want to issue a statement. And I don't know, but I assume it's probably one of those things going on. And I think the question that they're not asking that I want to ask you right now is, what do you hear from that silence?
To me, as a long-time horse player, I've been playing the races since I was 8 years old. I grew up around the track where every time I went to New York to see my grandparents, we would go to either Aqueduct or Belmont. And then later on, we used to take a trip to Saratoga every year during Travers Week. But, as somebody like myself that has a unique role in the game, as somewhat of a racial educator, if you will, of some people, it's very disheartening because it seems like, it feels like I don't matter. And there's a lot of people of color that play horses. I mean, I every time I go to Gulfstream Park or to Tampa, there's a large contingent of people betting and loving the sport and going out to the races and having a good time. And it's like we don't exist. You gotta have to feel, you should anyway, feel for your customers that are going through something like this, because it's very unique. It's a challenge. There are people that spend a lot of money as people of color in this game, particularly on the betting side. I mean, I see more people involved betting wise than I do anything else. So it would only make sense that you would feel a certain empathy towards that sort of thing, because it is a national problem. Racing in my mind is very much a microcosm of society. It it mirrors it to a T. So it's very, very difficult to swallow and see people say certain things or not say certain things in order, to kind of ease the pain of what's out there, because most of the time it just makes people feel uncomfortable. And that's where we got to get over that hurdle as a society, as well as in horse racing, because we've had many a times. I mean, last year was a mess on social media, horse racing social media, when this whole George Floyd thing went down. It was almost unbearable. I think people have come to grips with a lot of it. I think a lot of people haven't. But you're not seeing the outright disrespect that we were seeing last summer, May to like July. I think it was really, really bad. But that doesn't make everything go away. I see people say things and people interact with them, people that are kind of high up in the game too. So it's very conflicting for me, because I love the game so much. I mean, anybody that's ever been to my house has seen all the pictures and the woodwork that my wife has done to, help our home with horse racing stuff, because I love it. She understands that. And she also doesn't understand why I am so loyal to the sport, despite all those all the strife and the people that really can't or won't relate to someone like me.
Alicia, what does the silence say to you?
I mean, I echo everything that Barry just said. It makes, and he just said the perfect thing right now. He loves the sport so much. Those of us who are, we love the sport so much, especially those of us who have been part of it for, years, for decades. I mean, I've been, following horse racing since I was 5 years old, and I am not 5 years old anymore. I'm not going to say how old I am, but it ain't 5. But it has been a major part of my life for almost all of my life. And you just want, this statement applies across the board. You want the sport to love you the way you love it, appreciate you. Just like we want this country, quite frankly, to love us the same way that we love it, and show us the same level of respect and kind of humanity. And when I see, and I get so frustrated with this industry, because I do care. If I didn't care, then I would just let it spiral, let it go down the drain. But I do care, and I love this sport, and I want it to be better, and I just don't know that it wants to be better, because I haven't seen a whole lot of steps forward yet for it to really take up these causes and beyond just in a performative fashion. And you would think, if putting everything aside, we've touched on this before, putting aside it's the right thing to do, you would think, if nothing else from a business standpoint, if you want to grow your business, making your product as attractive as possible to as many people and groups as possible should be a no-brainer. For a sport that keeps saying its ongoing narrative is, how do we get new people? How do we grow the sport? How do we get fresh blood in? And yet it still cannot, it can't get this part right. It still has not figured out how to market itself, how to sell itself, how to make itself welcoming for everybody, from, be it, better race, creed, gender, from everybody. It should be, like I said, it's not enough to say the door is open. You have to make people feel welcome when you come through it. And I cannot understand. I mean, I know why, but it's hard to grasp how they have not been able to get to at least make some meaningful steps for this, if for no other reason, for their bottom line. Because the stats prove diversity is good for your bottom line. There are stats from businesses that show that. So why is this so hard?
I want to ask you guys. I feel like I want to sort of establish a baseline here, if you will. And what I want to ask about is, particularly Barry and Alicia, your personal experiences where you were made to feel welcome or unwelcome in the industry. Because I feel like some people who watch may say, okay, whatever. NYRA didn't issue a statement. Jockey Club didn't issue a statement. Whichever organization. What's the big deal? But so Barry, I know you and I have talked a little bit about some experiences you have had where, as good a, as active a horse player as you are, and as many people as you know in the industry, there were moments where you kind of felt like the industry was saying, you know what, you're not one of us, really. And I wonder if you would talk to those a little bit.
It just happens when it happens, and there's no predictor to it at all. I mean, for example, in February, I took my family to Tampa Bay Racetrack, and we were guests of Stable Duel, and they, kind of rolled out the red carpet for us. And there was a one point during the stint, hanging out. They had a bunch of tables. I think the person that was, kind of spearheading the whole event, she had left just to go either to the restroom or to the paddock or something. And I was literally left there alone. My wife and daughter bought some things at the gift shop. They went to put it in the car. And I was literally in this area by myself. And someone, I guess it was a security, just kind of pointed out that I shouldn't be there. She said, are you supposed to be sitting here? And I was like, yeah, I've been sitting here all day. My family was here. We were all kind of hanging out and having a good time. She kind of pushed the issue a little bit, and I was like, all right, well, I've seen this show before. But, there wasn't much I really could say other than, yeah, I'm supposed to be here. And she kind of lingered until other people came back and then went away. Now, from maybe another person's perspective, they might have said, oh, well, she was just, making sure everything was okay. However, this has happened to me before at a racetrack, at Churchill Downs in a similar fashion. I don't think Dave was actually there that night when we had the on-site tournament for Derby Wars, but something similar but a little bit worse happened where I was singled out in a crowd of about 150 people. And they actually threatened to kick me out, which was very surprising. I was in there, betting and making money and doing the whole thing. It was very fun. But it just goes to show you how, even though you're there, you may be perceived a certain way depending on what you look like, who you're with. And it's not a very good feeling. It almost kind of took the air out of the whole event, for me anyway, to the point where it's like, man, it's like, I don't even want to be here now. And I know, maybe my situation's a little bit unique, or maybe it isn't. But I'm sure at some point, at some time, someone's ran across someone in racing or in the industry that gave some sort of kind of backhanded response, or, something that was out of the norm for everyone else, but a black person or a person of color. And it's just too bad. I've obviously gotten over the whole thing. It wasn't something that I haven't seen before or wasn't used to. So, being the age I am, there's not much I haven't seen in that regard. And it just gets a little tiresome. But, just the fact that, my love for the game supersedes all the nonsense tells you how much I love this game. And also, with the people involved in it, I've met a lot of great people, and I've also met a lot of really, really crappy people. And, it's just shouldn't be that way. People reserve their politics for certain things. They, for whatever reason, like to lump racism in with political views. And that's kind of like the totally wrong way to think about it. I mean, it's almost like the whole industry needs a little bit of sensitivity training as far as that goes, and how things are perceived rather than the reality of the situation. I would definitely like to see more effort by racetrack management, to get them to understand the situation, understand how people of color could be of great value to their bottom line, like Alicia was saying. But for some reason, it just gets kind of pushed to the side and, oh yeah, we said something way back a year ago, so I think we're good for another 20 years. And that's not acceptable.
Dave, Alicia raised the point a minute ago where she said at some point you start to wonder, does the industry actually want to get better? And I'm curious from your perspective, you having raised the interesting point about inaction being its own action. From your perspective as a horse player and as a guy who's been very involved in the game for a number of years, does the industry want to get better?
I'm not sure. I want to respond to what Barry just said, because when I was a younger man in my 20s and in my 30s, I had a box at Arlington Park. And you would think a box holder that buys horses at Keeneland, wins a race on Kentucky Oaks Day, is going to get the red carpet treatment in Arlington Park. But because I was young, because I looked different, because I dressed different, I got treated differently than most of the other box holders at Arlington Park during that, 10-year stretch from the late 80s into the mid 90s when I was a box holder. And I always wondered why. Why did the security people treat me differently than they treated other people? And it was basically because I didn't look like everybody else. I didn't act like everybody else. I didn't talk like everybody else. I was loud. I was proud. I was having a good time. And that seemed to be a little bit too much for the people at Arlington Park to handle. And I just never really understood where these instructions come from for the security people and people, quote unquote, hassling people in the boxes, quote unquote, hassling people at the track. They're there to enhance your experience, not make your experience worse. And I just don't understand where that direction comes from to really, be mean to people when you don't have to be, when you're in a business where you're trying to be nice to people. And sometimes I wonder whether the horse racing business doesn't just want certain types of people. They say they want more bettors, they want more fans, they want more owners. Do they want more fans, more owners, more bettors, or do they want just a certain type of bettors, a certain type of owner, a certain type of fan? And their marketing sometimes really makes you question what they're after and who they're going after in their marketing.
Teresa, that seems like a point that's right up your alley. So maybe you want to speak to that.
I have a number of very active text threads with women friends in the racing business. They always make sure to let me know if I've missed it, and there's another ad that comes out for Pegasus or Florida Derby that has yet another scantily clad, probably white woman there to pitch the event without any picture of a horse. Racing just in general assumes that women at racetracks are there to wear hats and drink pretty cocktails. They're treated as ornaments in both the advertising and often on the track. Thank God, they're not up anymore, but I don't know if any of you, Dave, you might remember, Barry, you might too, the old Calder ads that had girls dancing like they were at a strip club in their underwear. And I can't remember what the link was. Oh, it was to play the exotics. And so they had a bunch of exotic dancers. And so I think it's hard for me. I see very little that the industry does in its marketing to try to attract people as bettors. And I think that even goes also for some of the men who are advertised in the pictures and the commercials as well. It very much seems about style over substance. And that just doesn't make sense to me, because even if you do get some people to come out to the track for Pegasus or whatever, they're not going to be showing up at a random, Friday card at Gulfstream. You're not building a customer base. And I actually think it's part of like a larger plan within racing, as we see also from these stacked stakes days, to promoting it not as an everyday sport and betting opportunity, but as something that you should only pay attention to, a few times a year.
Well, I can tell you one thing is I went to the Pegasus and the Florida Derby this year, and I pretty much think I'm one of maybe about 4 black people that were there. Total.
Which is not how it is on a normal day. Is that what you were saying before?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. There's a big Jamaican contingent that hangs out, and there's a big Spanish population over on the other side of the grandstand. I mean, it wasn't a normal day. I can definitely tell you that. I mean, not only was the crowd small, but it was not diverse at all.
And what do you think is the cause of that? Marketing, pricing? What do you think is driving that?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I mean, somebody like me isn't their target audience. I mean, if you saw any of the pre-hype videos for the Pegasus, it was. I mean, I don't really want to say this, but it was the Bobby Flay crowd. It was people that were upper echelon. There was limos driving up to the valet and everything, trying to kind of be seen. It was more of a for show event, not a keep your customers event. And that's really what was concerning a lot of people. Were I know that day I saw a lot of people that were really dumbfounded in how much they catered to that crowd rather than the normal everyday folks that come. And they priced them out. I think the ticket was at least $300 just to get in. And then you couldn't even maneuver around. You were stuck in one place. It was pretty bad. And Florida Derby was a little bit better, but not much.
And that seems to be such a trend, as you pointed out, for our big days, is again at a time when we as a sport should be trying to be more inclusive and more broad. And it seems like so often on our biggest days, the default setting is to try to be more exclusive and more, and kind of make it like this aspirational, or what they think is an aspirational experience, instead of one where everybody feels welcome. And then they sit around and will wring hands about why they can't grow their own customer base. And yet they go back and do the same thing. And there's times, like I said, I've said it before, and I feel like sometimes this industry is just gaslighting us on a daily basis, because they will sit there and say one thing with their message, we want to do this, we want to do that, and yet their actions could not be further what their stated mission say. So it's like, are you trolling us? Are you gaslighting us? Or like, what is going on here? Because again, you would think it would be, this is a time, especially, we're slowly coming out of COVID. We're slowly starting to open up. You want to try to get people back, do it in the safest way possible, but you want to try to make your sport, your product, your business as appealing as possible. And yet at every point of call, it seems like they just get it wrong. And I don't know how they get it so wrong when there is mountains of evidence. If all they did was follow in the tire tracks of other sports, they would be so much better off. Even the sports that still have work to do, if all they did was say, okay, we're gonna just follow what hockey's doing right now and steal some of their blueprint of what they're trying to do with their inclusivity. We're going to try to, this industry can't even think of being what the WNBA is in terms of diversity and inclusion and the work they've done. But it's like, let's try and emulate 1% of what the WNBA has been doing since its inception. Let's try to do a little bit of what the NBA has been trying to do. If all they try to do is emulate a fraction of what these other sports would be doing, they'd be so far ahead than what they are now.
I wanted to ask you guys, as a white guy, I see people who look like me all the time in everybody's marketing. How important, Barry and Alicia in particular, how important is it to you all to see people who look more like you in marketing for things like this?
It makes a huge difference. I mean, I think I told you this story the other day. How I don't know if anybody's seen the movie Men in Black International. Well, there's a little girl in that movie that my daughter sees herself in. She would never be able to say, "Hey, Daddy, I want to do that kind of thing," if she never saw that person in that movie. Same thing kind of flows into horse racing, where the lack of diversity shows. How could someone younger than me say, "Hey, you know what? I like this sport. I want to get into it. How can I get involved?" I don't see anybody like me doing things. There's a couple, but there's always room for more and could be better. And it definitely resonates because you see what's going on, and you see who's represented, and that makes a difference. And I think that really goes very much overlooked in the whole scheme of things. And even that one step, adding a person of color to a handicapping analysis team at a racetrack, I don't think I've seen any, to be honest with you. Not at any racetrack in America is there an authentic person of color doing analysis anywhere. It makes a difference. TVG is a different matter. They have a lot of black people and people of color working there. They're just not in front of the camera, which could also be problematic as well. But it does make a huge difference, especially for people trying to get in the sport and younger people. I always say it's usually like the 25 to 35-year-old range that's coming into money, able to play the sport on a regular basis if they want to. And there's people of color mixed in with that you have to be aware of, and it could be a huge untapped market for this sport, but they just refuse to acknowledge it and capitalize on it.
If you're a young black girl who's a horse racing fan and you're watching horse racing and you love horse racing, if you're a young black girl, who are your role models right now? Who do you have to look to? Who does Barry's daughter, who goes to the track with him, who does she see who looks like her? Who tells her that she can have a career in this industry that's not on the end of a shank?
Nobody.
And I was just going to jump in to say, and this is not, an original idea. Other people have said this for years. As we speak about the growing Latino and Hispanic population in the United States, the most visible athletes in horse racing, other than the horses, are the jockeys, and they're practically invisible in the sports marketing. So many ads for so many other sports focus on the athleticism and the artistry of a basketball player or a football player or a hockey player. And there's so little attention paid, and you would have to think that would be, there's a huge demographic in the States that would appeal to. And, the New York Racing Association used to have both a race caller and a handicapper in Spanish on track. And both of those positions were done away with. And I know that there are some other tracks who are doing that. But, you've got a built-in audience there. And I think very little is being made to court them or keep them. Although, Dave, it's a common horse player complaint that it doesn't really matter what you look like, that people don't pay enough attention to horse players.
No question about that. It's been banging my head against that wall for 35, 40 years now. No matter, horse players, everybody in this industry seems to overthink of what their importance is, but horse players are definitely at the head of that affair. And, it's our money our money used to fuel the purses, and now they don't as much. So maybe we're not as important as we think we are. But certainly as fans, as customers, we're not made to feel as important as most of us horse players think we should be made to feel as important as that.
So, Dave, what do you, in your mind, what do horse what can horse players do about that?
Very good question. It's a tricky one. It's one that I sometimes obsess with. One of the things horse players can do is just do the best. Really do the best they can do. Make the best decisions they can make. Support what deserves to be supported, and not support what doesn't deserve to be supported. I think that's one of the biggest problems for horse players is we're so caught up in our habits, so caught up in our old ways that, we forget that we can vote with our feet and vote with our bankrolls, vote with our, where we make our bets. And if there's things about certain tracks that we don't like, well, there are other tracks to bet on. And certainly, individually, that's one thing I've done over the years. I've, streamlined my choices as to who and where my wagers are made, for example.
Can you give us an example of sort of what are the reasons you? Obviously, I assume you've made some decisions based on bet types or takeout or whatever. But have you made decisions about tracks to bet based on issues like this?
I'll use Churchill Downs as an example. Years ago, I was betting on a rebate account through South Dakota, and my handle wasn't such that I was doing over $1 million a year. And Churchill and the ADW made an agreement that if somebody wasn't betting at least $1 million a year, and I think they pretty much made that deal with most of the ADWs, that I wouldn't be able to get a rebate on the Churchill Downs tracks, which include fairgrounds, which include not only wouldn't I be able to get a rebate on that, I wouldn't even have access to betting those tracks. I was basically cut off. So essentially, the people from Churchill Downs, they wanted me to bet exclusively through them at Twin Spires without a rebate, as opposed to betting on my ADW that I was getting a rebate at. And pretty much with the exception of Oaks Day and Derby Day and some big-time carryovers, I've been able to stay away from betting on the Churchill tracks over the years. And when it came like last September, when what was going on with the protests, the Breonna Taylor issues, and everything going on there, it just reiterated to me, it made my choices even that much easier not to go back and get too involved with the Derby last September. That's the most direct tie-in that I could give you that happened recently.
Barry, do you think bettors not betting to sort of advance social justice goals, is that a viable way forward?
It could be, but I don't think horse players in general are too loyal in any sense of the matter. They'll bet on anything when it all comes down to it. And especially for a cause, because I was really, really vocal last year about the whole My Kentucky Home thing, and it was a mess. It really was a mess, and I don't think Churchill did themselves any favors by having, the announcer come on and say a few words about speculative information about the song and why it exists and why it's played and so on. Like I said, it takes the air out of your sails very slowly but surely. These things pile up and it's like, well, why am I even doing this? I struggle with it all the time. I mean, it's gotten to the point where really Gulfstream Park is probably the only track I bet. Other than, big race days and extenuating circumstances, but I really, that's the only place I've ever felt comfortable playing the races, and it probably will be for a long time.
That's quite a statement for somebody who loves racing as much as you do. And Alicia, I'm curious because you were talking a minute ago about maybe the industry doesn't want to. Yet you're still here. You're still in the industry.
Yeah, we're all.
How do you change it?
Look at us. We're good. That's why we're here. That's why we're sitting here right now. That's why we're having these conversations. That's why we keep having these conversations. That's why we need to keep having these conversations because, as we know they will, if we collectively do not keep pushing for change, they will let this will. I mean, they're not really doing much of anything to begin with, but they will let this drop. They need to be. We've seen the lack of action, so. It's hard not to get frustrated because we all want change to come at a quicker pace, especially given the current climate in this country and what we've seen go on, especially the past year, and we've seen so many other businesses and industries kind of take up this mantle. I said good, bad, or indifferent. Some of them have done it better than others, but it feels like if not now, then when everything is going on. So if they don't really make any meaningful change, given this current climate, then when are they ever going to make change? But it's sad that it's going to fall on those of us to keep pushing because it should not just be on us, but we've seen that they do not come to this on their own, that they need to be shown, they need to be pulled to the table, they need to be educated, and even that may not be enough sometimes, but it's, we have to kind of, I talked to my mom yesterday about the verdict, and she was like, it's a step. And she's like, it's a step. It is a step towards progress. And you take the progress at this point where you can get it. So the fact that we are sitting here having this conversation, the fact that if we change one mind or open a mind from these conversations, if we get the fact that we have even gotten a few people or a few entities in this industry to even acknowledge this issue is a step, because they never acknowledged it before. They were never talking about this before. They never addressed it before until they were forced to. So the fact that we've even got them acknowledging it on some kind of level is itself progress. So we need to, and I'm speaking to myself as much as anybody, so I don't go crazy, is you need to take the progress where you can get it and focus on just keep going. Just because that's all we can do is just keep going and just keep trying to push that needle forward, even if it's just an increment at a time, because like I said, we know that they will let it drop if we don't push.
Got just about 10 minutes left here. I wanted a question that came up that someone submitted, I wanted to ask everybody. It's, how can you address inequalities inside horse racing that are built on the inequalities outside of it in the world at large? And I think it sort of dovetails with Alicia, so maybe we'll have you lead off the answers here, but I actually want to hear from everyone on this, because you also made the point, if not now, when? If not now, when? And I guess I wonder, how much is the question that was raised a thing that we need to be concerned about and cognizant of, and how much of it is a thing that could, kind of be a recipe for inaction?
Yeah, I said, I wish I had better answers for all of this, try, like I said, because you're right, trying to address the inequalities in the sport, and the sport directly mirrors what we're seeing going on in this country, just like, and it would be naive to think otherwise. I mean, systemic racism is so ingrained in our world, in our society, that to a level we don't even fully grasp and realize, and it would be, and so for anybody to think that it's not ingrained, not just in racing, I mean, it's through all of our culture. You think about about all the things that we consume from a marketing side, from everything that we consume. So much of it is filtered through that white lens, and we don't even realize it. So, as far as how to address the injustice within the industry and as well as the injustice outside of the world, I think they kind of have to go hand in hand. Is just try to educate as much as possible, and and also trying to strike that balance of educating while also making sure that those of us trying to do the work have the self-care of making sure that we're not just serving as everybody's dissertation. And some of that and a lot of that education may be educating people that they need to do the work themselves and not just rely on people of color to do the work for them, to educate for them. There is a lot of materials that are out there. There are a lot of resources that can be out there for aspiring allies who really do want to make a real difference. There are things that they can do, and they need to realize too that racism and white supremacy, it's not just blatant. It's not just, oh, I've got a hood and I'm burning a cross and that's a devil. It is, like I said, it can be so subtle, and it can be through so many microaggressions, and it's recognizing that and recognizing your own privilege, recognizing your own biases, and really working to be an anti-racist and working to acknowledge that things. I think if people kind of individually can take those steps of kind of examining themselves, examining their own biases, their own reaction to things, that collectively we can change the culture of this industry, the culture of our own worlds, and hopefully eventually the culture of this world in general.
Barry, curious for your take. Can we make change in our little corner of the universe when the larger universe around us has problems every bit as ingrained as horse racing does?
Absolutely. It's just a matter of desire. If the people in charge want to change, they can change. And maybe it takes the right person to reach that ultimate decider in order to facilitate that change. I don't believe it would come from somebody like myself, or maybe not even Alicia in the position that she has. But there's someone there that may want to listen to somebody else. But we have to have that buy-in from the person in charge in order to move things forward. Without that, it's never going to go anywhere. They'll just keep pushing it aside or keep doing whatever. I mean, I have a small story. A friend of mine, he's a jockey, and he's pretty good. He just doesn't get a lot of mounts. And someone asked him, well, how come these trainers always talk good about you, but yet never put you on any horses? And he basically has no answer to that, because they do talk very good about him, but he just doesn't get any mounts. They'll talk good about him all day, and that's his frustration with the whole thing too, is that I can ride with the best of them, but if I don't get a shot, how can I show anybody? And I think that kind of goes to the whole adage of how things are dictated throughout the industry, top to bottom. And it's permeated so much that, the views that we may have are very far and few in between. And in order to get us to where we need to be, there's got to be someone, higher up, a decision maker that has buy-in on it. And until that happens, I think we're just going to be kind of spinning our wheels.
Dave, as an ally, how do you see this? Are we going to be able to move the meter here in the text we live in?
Well, I sure hope so. That's the point of this whole panel. And what Alicia said a couple minutes ago was just absolutely brilliant. And to all the older white guys like myself, either approaching the quarter pole, past the quarter pole already, it's a completely different world we're living in now in the third decade of the 21st century. You know, the 1970s of Secretariat, Seattle Slew affirmed Ali Dar, spectacular bid, long time ago. So was the 80s with Easy Go or Sunday Silence, John Henry, Ali Sheba. Even the 90s, Cigar, Formal Gold, Skip Away. That's all last century. Heck, Don Rickles was welcome on late night comedy shows back in the 20th century. It was cringeworthy then. It's cringeworthy now. Change is good. You can change. You can open up your mind, listen, learn, be supportive. And Alicia, I've just got to say, keep on doing what you're doing. You're an inspiration. I hope there's more people like me out there that are willing to listen, that are willing to buy in, and that are willing to change to try and make the world a better place.
You are not going to make me cry. You're not going to make me cry on here. But thank you. And thank you for always being so supportive and for being a real ally. You're not making me cry.
That's not what I'm here for.
Yeah.
Elise is definitely not crying here, so we will get the camera off her, Mitchell, and why don't we put it on Teresa instead? And Teresa, your thoughts on this issue?
Yesterday to snow on the ground in Kentucky. This is allergies.
As someone who's been responsible for hiring, albeit in an industry very different from horse racing, but in private education, 20 years ago, when I was an English department head, we knew then that we had to change the way we thought about whom we were going to hire. We had to actively seek people to diversify our faculty. We couldn't just wait for the applications to come to us. And we also needed to change as an institution so that we would be a place that people of color would want to come teach and that students of color would want to come learn. I think, very few of us are surprised when yet another press release comes out and the name of the person who has been appointed to some new position is the name of the same person who was in the last position or on this board. They're not, the names are all the same over and over, and they kind of move around. And I think that television stations, racetracks, organizations like the Breeders' Cup have to go beyond the immediate circle of networking to make the choice to look for people that they want to hire, not from the usual places. I also think it would be great if there were some, kind of backstretch training program so that there was a path to improvement and promotion for hot walkers, grooms, and assistant trainers, many of whom are people of color. Many more of them are people of color that are, in fact, full-fledged trainers. So you don't want your job on the backstretch. None of us want that job to be our ultimate job. So what programs can be put on the backstretch that say you are doing a really good job in the job you're in? Are you interested in this next step up the ladder? And how can we facilitate your getting there? And I think for those things to happen, I just think it's really important. And this is hard, as someone who grew up from a background that I would not have called privileged. When I first heard the word white privilege, I was like, no way, that's not me. I'm not privileged. And it took me a while to understand that that word meant something very different. And it meant that I could do things like go into a restaurant or a grocery store or a gift shop, or a housing rental office or a job interview, and never ever worry about whether the color of my skin was going to be a reason that I was not welcome. And so often on social media, when issues of social justice come up, people will say things like, when I was a kid, this, that, and the other thing, and, if I can do it, so can they. And maybe in some cases that's true, but I also think, as Alicia said, it's just really important to listen to people whose experiences are different from yours and to accept them as real. There's no need to be skeptical of the story that somebody else is telling you. It's their story, and they know it way better than you do.
All right, I think we're really at the end of our hour here. So let me let's go around the horn here for any last thoughts that people might have. Barry, last thoughts.
I think this is the ultimate thought I've always had. I think I told you this the other day. We're in a situation as a sport where we need to evolve or die. We can't die on the hill of this is what we've always done because it's not working.
You're not wrong about that, even a little bit. Dave, what about you? Last thoughts.
My choice is to live in the future. I want to live in the future because that's where the rest of my life's going to be. I don't want to live in the past.
Amen to that. Teresa, last thing?
I have a lot of thoughts in my head right now. And I guess, the big one, and Alicia alluded to this earlier, diversifying your workforce is not an act of generosity and altruism and noblesse oblige. It makes your business better. So stop thinking about it as a favors that you need to do for other people and about bringing people in who are actually doing you a favor by choosing to work at the workplace you've created.
Alicia?
No ditto crying. What everybody said. No, allergies. Like I said, I just want this sport to be better. I want this sport to be to be what we want it to be because we do care, we do love it, we have invested so much in it. But I also want it to take this very seriously and know that if it does not take action, that, like I said, as Barry said, it's, it needs to change for its own existence. And there are consequences for actions. We finally saw that yesterday with the verdict. There are consequences. And if this sport does not take this seriously, there will be consequences, and they will not be good ones, but they have a chance to be on the right side of history should they choose to.
All right, good stuff. I just to piggyback on what everybody's saying here, if you look at the numbers over the last 20-ish years, nationwide betting handle is down by about half in real dollars. The full crop is down by about half. Every trend tells you we're going in exactly the wrong direction. As an industry, we need to start acting like our hair is on fire, and we need to start realizing that we need to do almost everything differently from what we've been doing for the last umpteen years. It's time to look to the future, as Dave just said. It's time to really, for this industry, to start living in the 21st century. We live in a diverse, multicultural, multi-ethnic world today. And we're either going to live in that world or we're going to die in the one we inhabited in the past. And so I really appreciate everybody here for being a part of this conversation today. Appreciate everybody watching on Facebook, YouTube, and theracingbiz.com. We will be doing more of these to come. We don't have the dates quite lined up yet, but we will shortly, and we'll keep everybody posted. And thank you, Barry, Alicia, Dave, Teresa, and everybody watching. Good stuff. Really appreciate it, and look forward to continuing the conversation down the road.
Thank you.
All right, y'all are done.